The benefits of allowing our natural curiosity to drive our clinical work and the pitfalls of working like a technician. That's what I'm going to try to talk about right now. So I'm all for getting interventions, principles, meaning the rationale for our interventions, metapsychology, into implicit automatic memory. I'm all for getting the central dynamic sequence really down pat, though that's really an interactive diagnostic process, so it's not something you can necessarily get good at simply by memorizing things. But bottom line is I transcribed the majority, I would say 90 to 95% of all of my supervision hours that I had with Marvin Scorman and some others more peripherally. I transcribed them all. I mean, that added hours to my work week. But I did that so that it would really go deep into me, into the cellular part of me, if you will. So I definitely believe in the importance of acquiring a solid body of knowledge. Let's get that right. But here's the thing. At some point, in order to truly potentiate our work, we need to embody and integrate what we have learned into a natural and genuine stance where our natural curiosity and interest in really understanding our clients drive what we do with them. So I'm talking about going from a mindset of a sort of a technician or a mechanic where we're working on the client, like a car mechanic would be working on a car, to working with the person seeking our help. And as far as I know, this conceptualization of working with instead of on, I believe that was Dr. Asimo who coined that way of conceptualizing it. Maybe he learned it from someone else, I don't know. But as far as I know, he's the one that deserves credit for that really elegant and astute way of conceptualizing this particular dynamic. So this is a different state of mind than the technician's or mechanic's state of mind. And it does require that we have enough knowledge down so that that can operate automatically in the background. So you might fairly ask, then what's in the foreground? Well, picture a situation where all your knowledge that you work so hard to acquire has, in a sense, collapsed into a natural, curious stance where what's in the forefront of your mind at all times is simply an attempt to understand your client, not necessarily to change or fix your client, but to understand them, and then obviously to help your client change themselves. So the first phase of the central dynamic sequence, inquiry, obviously that's somewhat self-evident how that ties into this, where we are curious. What brings you to therapy? What are you envisioning being different if we're successful together? What are your goals? We try to understand their difficulties, what precipitates their difficulties, the nature of their difficulties, right? So obviously, this is a slam dunk for our natural curiosity, but it goes further, even with the face of pressure and even challenge, right? Pressure, when we ask the client to be more specific, can you be more specific? Can we look at some specific instances, examples, right? Our natural curiosity is in the driver's seat, if we allow it, okay? Even the intervention of challenge, like if you don't, like who are you? Who is the client if without these barriers that they throw up, right? Without these walls, who is the person sitting in front of us? So inquiry, pressure, challenge, and then obviously the consolidation phase, the analysis of the transference, exploring the core neurotic structure, after the unlocking and so on and so forth. Our natural curiosity can drive all of that, be the driving force of our work. And my position is that that is a far more powerful place to work from than when we are primarily focused on trying to execute a technique. When the natural curiosity is in the driver's seat, we don't come across as robotic or clunky. We come across as more genuine and more simply interested and concerned. And that's important. Clients can pick up on when we're simply following a script versus when we're actually being genuine and genuinely trying to understand them. on their terms, not just imposing our own terms on the client. People pick up on that sort of thing. So this is quite important if you really want to potentiate your work. So yeah, I say let your natural curiosity drive the whole thing. Too often therapists have gotten out of touch with that curiosity in favor of a concern around executing a technique. And I think that happens to all of us, especially early on. It's part of the learning process. So I do that sometimes, we are all a work in progress, but I am advocating for potentiating our work through letting technique operate in the background and letting the foreground consist of our humanity and our natural curiosity. The other thing that tends to get lost when we become overly preoccupied with executing a technique is the bigger picture. We tend to get a sort of tunnel vision. So here's an example. A while back, I had a supervisee who showed me some of their work. And at the beginning of the session, the client that we were watching was describing a family scene where a family member had expectations on the client. And it was obviously an emotionally charged theme, this thing about expectations. And but for whatever reason, my supervisee didn't pick up on it, but instead went into more of a narrow focus, such as you seem detached right now. What feelings are coming up here towards me? An intervention that in other contexts can be perfectly suitable and effective. But in this particular instance, it missed the bigger picture, that the client had begun to see the therapist as one more figure in their life with expectations. And they were going through the motions, being compliant, trying to be a good ISTDP patient. So that was getting lost, and that's why the work wasn't gaining more traction. Okay, not that my supervisee was wrong. I mean, the client really was detached. Obviously, there were feelings that were being avoided through the mechanism of the detachment. So it's not that the supervisee was wrong, but it's that they used a really up-close lens when what was needed was a zooming out to get a broader, wider perspective that included all the contextual data that pointed to what was really going on in the transference. Just what I said, the client saw the therapist as one more person with expectations, and that's what needed to be addressed. So from my point of view, the idea is that we often need to attend to those kind of themes, like the theme of the client being sensitive to expectations, for example, and make them explicit and really anchor them in the client's understanding, so that these sort of hot button issues and themes, that they are really crystal clear in the patient's mind, and so that we can incorporate that into transference analyses. So this relates to not missing the forest for the trees. Again, the key elements that needed attention were only visible when zooming out to a broader view and attending to the contextual information. The contextual information got lost with the myopic view. So what are some other benefits to working with rather than on the person looking for help? And what are some other benefits in allowing our natural curiosity to drive our work? We become more present and attuned to our client. We become more genuine. We ourselves become more open, where we can access genuine care and love for our clients, and where we can bring ourselves and our various unique strengths into the clinical encounter. We become more open to seeing the client's strengths, the ways that their criticism of us is sometimes on point and not defensive at all. We become more clear on how our diagnostic categories are useful guides, not reified things. We're better able to spot when we create iatrogenic resistance, meaning that we ourselves are provoking the resistance unnecessarily. We become more open to seeing ways that our client actually disconfirms our hypotheses and assumptions, rather than just looking for patterns that confirm what we already believe. So in this way, we actually adopt a more truly scientific approach. We'll see how some clients actually simply do not fit neatly into the diagnostic categories that we have learned about. The things that were invisible to us when we only saw our client through the lens of our model. We will see when a corrective emotional experience is more important than an unlocking of the unconscious. And we'll become more attuned to misalliances and moments when the client is just not clear on why they would want to look at their feelings. They're not clear on the therapeutic task. We become more open to when the client is being open, even though if it's short of an unlocking, the client is actually collaborating and being rather emotionally intimate. And we become more equipped at supporting that as opposed to automatically by default pushing for more. So by and large, we just have a more clear vision. We see things more clearly, more flexibly. Our perceptions are more flexible. And maybe the most important reason of all, it helps us enjoy our work more. I want to say that again. It helps us enjoy our work more. That is nothing to scoff at, nothing at all. Sometimes the sex analogy is actually helpful. You can say that with techniques you can achieve an orgasm, which in ISTDP we can compare that to the unlocking of the unconscious. But techniques won't help us make love. And to stay in this analogy, the making love part can be compared to facilitating the kind of healing that only happens when we have a genuine give and take relationship on equal footing, where our curiosity and our humanity is in the driver's seat. So I can't help it. What I'm discussing now ties so nicely into some of Dr. Iain McGilchrist's ideas on hemispheric brain differences. So for the heck of it, I'm going to include some citations here and offer some commentary.
So Iain McGilchrist, from his book Ways of Attending, page 18. The right hemisphere is better at making connections between things. It tends to see things as whole, whereas the left hemisphere sees the parts. This has further consequences. The left hemisphere tends to see things more in the abstract. The right hemisphere sees them more embedded in the real-world context in which they occur. As a corollary, the right hemisphere seems better able to appreciate actually existing things in all of their uniqueness, while the left hemisphere schematizes and generalizes things. And here, from page 38 of his newest book, The Matter with Things, page 38. By paying a certain kind of attention, you can humanize or dehumanize, cherish or strip of all value. By a kind of alienating, fragmenting, and focal attention, you can reduce humanity, or art, sex, humor, or religion, to nothing. You can so alienate yourself from a poem that you stop seeing the poem at all, and instead come to see in its place just theories, messages, and formal tropes. Stop hearing the music and hear only tonalities and harmonic shifts. Stop seeing the person and see only mechanisms, all because of the plane of attention. More than that, when such a state of affairs comes about, you are no longer aware that there is a problem at all, for you do not see what it is you cannot see. So, in sum, from my point of view, Iain McGilchrist is talking about the left hemispheric way of attending as comparable to what I refer to as working on the patient. This is where we become technicians or mechanics. And he talks about right hemispheric ways of attending as what I've tried to capture in talking about working with. So this is a very, very brief snapshot of a couple of gems from Iain McGilchrist. If this caught your attention at all, I can't recommend his work enough. He's such a brilliant thinker. All right, that'll be all for now.